Okay, so the White House just dropped a huge announcement that's going to completely overhaul the rules for every single car sold in America. So today, we're going to dig into the repeal of these pretty aggressive CAFE fuel standards. We'll look at the administration's reasoning, exactly what's changing, and the economic ripple effects they say are coming. And there it is. That one statement kicked off this massive policy shift. It's a total 180 from the regulations of the last administration. So let's really get into what's behind this decision and what it's going to mean for the auto industry. All right, let's start with the big picture here. This isn't just some tiny tweak to the rules. No, this is a fundamental change in how the government regulates the very cars we drive every day. So the core of this whole thing is a full-on repeal of the fuel economy rules that the last administration put in place. This move basically reverses a long-running trend of pushing for higher and higher fuel efficiency, and that's a shift that is definitely going to be felt by every car company and every car buyer in the country. So you might be asking, why such a dramatic change? Well, during the announcement, they laid out a really clear case against the old CAFE standards. Let's take a look at the specific problems they said they were trying to solve. But first, a super quick refresher on what these CAFE standards actually are. The easiest way to think about it is like a fleet-wide GPA for gas mileage. Every year, each car maker has to make sure the average fuel economy of all the vehicles they sell hits a specific target that the government sets. So the argument against CAFE, as they presented it, had a lot of different parts. Officials claim the standards drove up car prices by more than 25%. They also said they made cars less safe by forcing companies to use lighter, less durable materials like plastic instead of steel. They called the 62 miles per gallon target unattainable and framed it as part of a bigger plan to get rid of gasoline cars altogether. And what you're seeing here are really two totally different philosophies. The old way used electric vehicles and hybrids to help bump up that fleet average. It also allowed certain states, like California, to set their own, even stricter rules. The new approach? Well, they say it's all about focusing only on combustion engines to create one single national standard that, they argue, is much more in line with what people actually want to buy.
Okay, so that's the why. Now, how are they actually putting all of this into action? Well, the announcement laid out a pretty clear multi-step plan to get it done.
All right, they laid out 4 key moves. First up, the Department of Transportation is officially throwing out the old fuel economy rules. Second, the EPA is canceling the related tailpipe emission standards. Third, and this one is a big deal, they're revoking California's special waiver, which means the state can't set its own stricter rules anymore. And finally, they're creating a brand new tax break that's aimed squarely at car buyers. Yeah, let's zoom in on that tax deduction for a second. It's part of a bigger bill, and the idea is that if you take out a loan to buy a car, you can now deduct the interest you pay on that loan from your income tax. This was pitched as a huge deal for affordability, a major tax cut designed to help middle and lower income families get into a new vehicle. So with all these rules changing, what's supposed to happen next? Well, the announcement was absolutely packed with promises and projections for what this new policy is going to mean for the American economy, for workers, and for you, the consumer. The most direct benefit they highlighted for consumers was all about saving money. The administration said that this move is expected to save the average buyer at least $1,000 right off the sticker price of a new car. And, they said, it could potentially be a lot more than that. And for the industry, the number they threw out was just huge. They announced that $70 billion in new investment is now pouring into the American auto industry. They directly linked that flood of cash to this new regulatory environment. And to prove their point, they showed some numbers to highlight a pretty dramatic turnaround in production. According to them, U.S. auto production had actually fallen by 5% under the previous administration. But so far this year, they say it's surged by 10% under these new policies. Now, that $70 billion number wasn't just some vague figure. We heard directly from auto CEOs about where that money's going. Ford's putting in $5 billion and creating 4,000 jobs. Stellantis is investing $13 billion to ramp up U.S. production by 50%. And General Motors is investing $4 billion to bring manufacturing back home from Mexico. These were the concrete examples they pointed to as proof the policy is working. And it wasn't just about the money either. They promised a whole slate of other good things would come from this. We're talking more American auto jobs, safer cars on the road, because more people will buy new, safer vehicles and they can use stronger materials, and just more freedom. Freedom for you to choose the car you want and for automakers to build the cars people actually want to buy.
To really hammer the point home, here's what Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, had to say. He called it a victory of common sense and affordability, and said that by aligning the rules with what customers want, it lets his company and others invest in affordable cars made right here in the U.S. So let's wrap this up. The administration and the big auto companies are framing this as a clear win, a common sense move for jobs, for affordability, and for your freedom of choice. We've walked through their reasons and their promises, but a shift this big, this significant, it naturally brings up a much larger question. Is this the right economic correction we needed, or is it a controversial step backward on environmental policy? That, right there, is the big debate that's going to define the road ahead.